The wind whispered through the branches as the girl stepped into the cold garden. Her small fingers gripped the string of a red balloon, the only color in a gray world. She looked up to the clouds, her lips pressed into a silent wish. It was her birthday. Again. Each year, she released a balloon, hoping someone out there would see it. The other children stayed inside, unaware or uninterested. The caretaker watched from a window, arms folded, expression unreadable. The balloon lifted into the sky, dancing with the wind. A flicker of hope lit her pale eyes. Far above, the balloon faded into the gray, swallowed by distance and cloud. She turned and walked back inside without a word. The gate to the orphanage creaked slightly in the wind, as if it too had witnessed something fragile. Inside, the girl folded a piece of paper and hid it beneath her pillow. The note read, "Please find me. Yay." Another birthday. Another balloon. The girl's hands trembled slightly as she tied a new note to the string. Her dress was a little longer now, patched again and again. She had grown, but not enough to stop believing. She released the balloon with a quiet breath, watching it rise. Somewhere, she hoped, someone was watching too. The garden smelled of earth and forgotten things. Children's laughter echoed faintly from the building, but none joined her. She waited until the balloon was a speck, then whispered, "Happy birthday." Yee. A sudden gust nearly knocked her over, as if the world responded in kind. She steadied herself, cheeks flushed, eyes still on the sky. A bird flew past the balloon, then veered away, uninterested. Inside, the caretaker made another mark in her file. The girl returned to her room, one hand brushing the wall like it might remember her touch. The girl drew the same shape again and again, a balloon drifting skyward. She had little else to do but wait and imagine. Each drawing held a different skyline, a different imagined place. She wondered what it would feel like to follow the balloon herself, to be lighter than her sorrow floating away. The pages of her notebook curled at the edges, stained by time and fingers. She hid it under the mattress each night, a secret world no one could take. One page bore a face, blurred, kind eyes, someone unknown. She called him the Finder, and she believed he existed. He would see her balloon. He would come. He would come. In her dreams he did. He had a coat that smelled like rain and shoes that knew far places. The wind outside moaned like a question never answered. She pulled the blanket tighter, heart aching with hope. The attic was forbidden, but she had found the key months ago. She crept up when the others slept, drawn by something unnamed. Old trunks and forgotten toys lined the walls, ghosts of other childhoods. She opened one box and found photographs, faces she didn't know. Some smiled. Some stared blankly. All were gone. She touched the images gently as if they might speak. One picture had a boy with a kite, his smile wide and warm. She imagined him holding her balloon string instead. A shiver passed through her. She wasn't sure why. She took the photo and placed it in her notebook. Maybe he was the Finder. Maybe he once lived here too. Dust floated in the shaft of light like tiny stars. She whispered, "Come find me." Need I? The city buzzed with noise, color, and motion. He walked among it, camera slung over his shoulder, searching without knowing what for. At the edge of a crosswalk, he paused. Something red caught his eye. A balloon. Hi-ya. Far. Dot. Almost lost. It shouldn't be here, but there it was, bright against the darkening sky. He lifted his camera instinctively, then lowered it just as fast. It stirred something in him, a memory that didn't quite surface. He followed its path with his eyes until buildings blocked the view. For a reason he couldn't name, he turned down a side street. The balloon had moved west. So did he. His phone buzzed, but he ignored it. Somewhere beyond the traffic, beyond the noise, he felt pulled, as if someone had whispered, "Please find me. Me." And so he began to walk. The city lights blinked below, but his eyes were fixed on the horizon. He hadn't stopped walking since he saw the balloon. It didn't make sense, but he didn't question it. Something inside him stirred, a feeling he hadn't named in years. The rooftop was calm, high above the chaos. He pulled out his notebook, sketches of places he wanted to go. He added a new drawing, a girl holding a balloon in a gray garden. Where had that image come from? It felt borrowed from a dream. The balloon in the sky was long gone, but its path still lingered in his mind. He marked a location on his map, a place he hadn't visited since childhood. It was time to follow that memory. Below, a bus rumbled past. He made his decision. He would find the source of that red balloon. The road was quiet, broken only by the crunch of gravel underfoot. He hadn't spoken to anyone since he left the city. His phone had no signal, but he didn't mind. This silence felt like truth. He passed fences, fields, forgotten places. The wind carried a chill that tasted like memory. A bird circled overhead, then flew toward the hills. He followed it without knowing why. There were signs of people, faint laughter in the distance, smoke curling from chimneys. But he stayed on the path, eyes fixed ahead. The sketch in his notebook guided him more than any map, and the feeling, that strange pull, never left. A rusted sign appeared ahead, partially hidden by overgrowth. The name was faded, but he recognized it. This was where the balloon had come from. The gates creaked slightly in the wind, the sound hauntingly familiar. He stood before them, unsure if he was ready to enter. The place looked like it hadn't changed in decades. He reached out and touched the cold metal, his breath catching. A childhood whisper returned. Had he been here before? The building loomed like a silent sentinel, windows like watching eyes. He rang the bell. No one answered. He tried the gate. It opened with a reluctant groan. He stepped inside slowly, each footfall an echo. Leaves scattered underfoot as if disturbed from a long sleep. He felt both out of place and exactly where he was meant to be. Something tugged at his memory. Shadows, corridors, a little girl's laughter. He took a deep breath and approached the door. It opened before he could knock. The air inside was thick with silence and time. The caretaker stood just beyond the threshold, arms crossed, expression guarded. He introduced himself, though he didn't quite know what to say. She didn't smile. "We don't get visitors," she said. He explained the balloon, the walk, the dream. She listened, unmoved, but something flickered in her eyes. "Wait here," she said, then vanished into the hallway. He looked around. The walls held faded paintings and photos. One showed a girl, alone in the garden, holding a red balloon. His breath caught. He stepped closer, drawn to her expression. She looked like someone waiting for something that would never come. Until now, the garden was just as he remembered from the photo. The same bench, the same crooked tree. And then he saw her. She stood alone, balloon in hand, just as he had imagined. Older now, eyes wiser, still waiting. She turned slowly, as if she had known he would come. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. Words felt unnecessary in that moment. He stepped closer, unsure. She smiled, barely, but it was enough. The balloon string fluttered between them. He reached out, not for the balloon, but for her hand. She didn't pull away. A breeze passed, carrying the balloon upward. This time she let it go for real. They sat in silence for a long time, the clink of utensils echoing in the room. The table stretched long and empty between them. Neither of them knew what to say first. She pushed a chipped plate toward him. unsure if he would accept. He took it, nodding gently, gratitude in his eyes. "You really followed it?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He nodded. "I didn't know why. Just that I had to." "Ye?" The old bulbs above flickered with every breeze. "You're the first," she said, "to ever follow it." His fingers touched the notebook in his pocket, but he didn't pull it out yet. They ate in silence again, but it felt different, no longer lonely. Outside, the wind passed gently, like it was listening. She led him upstairs, past doors that creaked inside. The attic smelled of time and paper. She opened a small trunk, pulling out a notebook worn and weathered. He watched as she flipped through pages of balloons, skies, and lonely rooftops. One page showed a face that looked eerily like his. He looked up, stunned. She smiled shyly. "I've been drawing you since I was 8, she said. His voice failed him. He reached out and touched the page. It was the same sketch he had drawn back in the city. "We were meant to meet," he murmured. She nodded slowly, as if she'd always known. The attic glowed brighter, like it too believed. They sat beneath the crooked tree, its bare branches etched against the sky. The red balloon bobbed gently in the breeze beside them. She told him about birthdays, silence, and the weight of waiting. He told her about cities, noise, and the emptiness of forgetting. Their words filled the space that once held only solitude. Laughter came softly, then freely. She showed him the hiding spots, the secret corners of her world. He showed her photographs of places she had never seen. They fit together like two halves of a long-lost story. The sun dipped lower, turning everything gold. He looked at her and saw someone who had never stopped believing. She looked at him and saw someone who had finally come home. The moon hung low, casting silver across the iron gates. He stood outside them again, backpack on, camera slung. This time, it was harder to walk away. She had stayed behind, watching from the garden path. They had agreed. This wasn't the end, only a beginning. He turned back, and she raised her hand in quiet farewell. The wind stirred the leaves around his feet. He stepped into the night, the road ahead both known and unknown. A balloon string hung from his wrist, red, soft, full of meaning. He didn't let go. Not yet. Time passed. Seasons changed. She was older now, no longer the girl from the garden, but she still carried the same journal. The park was alive with color and warmth. A red balloon floated beside her, tied to her wrist. She stopped at a bench, opened the journal, and wrote. A man approached with a camera, smiling. She smiled back. The balloon swayed gently between them. Somewhere above, another balloon joined it, drifting freely. Their stories had crossed once, and they would again. The train arrived with a low hum and a breath of steam. She stood quietly, the balloon tugging at her wrist. This journey had been long in the making. The suitcase at her side held only the essentials and the journal. Other passengers bustled past, unaware of the weight of her silence. She boarded slowly, glancing back just once. The orphanage was far behind now, but its roots still held her gently. She found a window seat and tied the balloon to the rail. It hovered there like a quiet promise. The train began to move. Her story was moving too. She smiled faintly, her reflection in the glass meeting her eyes. The red balloon drifted slightly with the train's rhythm. The bookstore was warm, a haven of quiet thoughts and dust motes. She wandered through the aisles, her fingers brushing the spines. The balloon bobbed beside her, unnoticed by most, but not by him. He stood near the photography books, unsure how to say hello. It had been months. Letters sent, stories shared, but no meetings. Until now. She looked up, eyes widening as they met his. No words again, just the softness of presence. He stepped forward, and the balloon string brushed his arm. She handed him a book, an empty journal. "Fill this one," she said. He took it, heart full. The shop faded around them as if the world had narrowed to just this. They climbed to the rooftop in silence, the city a quiet hum below. Candles flickered in glass jars, casting golden light. The blanket was soft, a little worn, perfect. They shared stories now with ease. Childhoods, dreams, fears. She spoke of hope in the form of red balloons. He shared photographs of people who forgot to hope. They laughed, cried, rested in the space between words. Above them, stars blinked like slow heartbeats. The red balloon danced beside a new one. White, fresh, unfamiliar. Two dreams tied together. When they held hands now, it felt natural. No more waiting. The lake was still, mirror-like, reflecting the rising sun. They stood at the edge, side by side. She held the red balloon. He held the white. No words were needed. They let go together, watching them rise. The mist curled around their ankles, gentle and cool. The balloons floated upward, twisting in slow spirals. Two symbols of the past, and everything ahead. They watched until the colors became specks. Her fingers found his again. This was how healing began, not loud, but honest. The room was full of laughter, the scent of paint and promise. Children ran past, curious and bright-eyed. She dipped her brush into red, forming the outline of a balloon. He added a tree, the same one from the orphanage. Together, they painted a garden of memory and hope. The mural grew, flowers, sky, smiling faces. A balloon for every story never told. The children added their own marks, giggling. This place, once quiet, now pulsed with life. She stood back, brush still in hand, heart full. He smiled at her, eyes filled with the same wonder. The red balloon wasn't just a wish anymore. It was a beginning.